Hi, thanks for joining me today. We are talking about anxiety, which is a very well-known thing for many of you, either experiencing it personally or living with somebody who deals with a lot of anxiety. And it's kind of a complex thing, and it's also very simple. So stick with me to the end of this video, and we're going to talk about what it does to your body, what it does to your relationships, and how to truly fight against it so that it does not have to be a lifelong diagnosis that you stick with. So anxiety has been around forever, but it's kind of in an epidemic status now compared to many years ago, right? It's not a new thing, but it's something that is increasingly a problem for a lot of people. There's an increasing amount of anxiety medication given out and all that sort of thing. So I want to be clear from the beginning here that my personal approach is from a more holistic standpoint, right? I don't think that medicine is bad. I don't think that it's not okay. I think it absolutely has its time and its place. But I approach it more from there's a root for all the things that we go through, right? And again, there might be a time and a place where medication can help, and I'm not saying that's not okay. That's something for you to decide personally. I just like to encourage my clients and you guys on these videos to know that there's a root cause for a lot of it. There's a root source for much of it. An idea I have that also, if you guys have any thoughts on this, I'd love to hear in the comments below. But one way I look at it, and part of this is from the own little bouts of anxiety that I've experienced, is it sort of seems like for a lot of people, not all, but a lot of people, there can be like this event or this instance or situation, experience, whatever that happens that just kind of opens the floodgates to anxiety. And when that happens, it's almost like all of a sudden, before you know it, there's an overwhelming anxiety, and that becomes their natural state, right? It becomes their norm. There's people, I've worked with so many people with high anxiety like this, that it's not even like these couple things give me anxiety. It's like, this is my constant. This is what I'm used to. And I'm just figuring out how to keep my head above water every day. And like I said, not all, but for a lot of them, it really seemed like once we started to dig back a little bit, we figured out there was this thing that happened, and this thing that happened opened the gates to that. So the reason I'm sharing this is because that doesn't mean that you just got to turn that switch off and anxiety goes away. However, it's a huge clue to know, okay, if I have unfinished business, so to speak, or unresolved trauma, or something along those lines regarding this issue, circumstance, experience, then maybe if I deal with that, a lot of my anxiety might dissipate. This is where the hard work comes in, but this is where the freedom in anxiety is that we have to retrain our brain to know, I don't have to still be anxious for this. When I was 7 and didn't know where my next meal was coming from, or I was just hoping to get lunch at school, we don't have to be there anymore, right? If you have come out of that place and you are now in a safer place, but your body and your mind are defaulting to your anxiety, that is normal, and that's just kind of how it works, right? Because side science note here, our brain makes pathways, right? And the way I like to describe it is, I don't know, I live where we get snow sometimes, and so if you drive on snow, it can make these deep ruts in the road, and you just kind of follow the ruts. But if you try to go off of them, it actually can like really throw you off, and your car just wants to go back into the ruts, right? I guess the same would be said for mud. So it's hard to go out of those, but it's possible. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of determination. It takes consistency, but it's possible to get out of those ruts. And that's exactly what it is for our mind. Our mind has those ruts. So for this example, the deep grooves of feeling anxious for maybe that one start of trigger, but it led to other things. that anxious feeling becomes the norm. That anxious feeling becomes the ruts that we so easily drive in, that we operate in, that we stay in. And to veer out of them is really hard. It feels super unnatural. It feels awkward. It feels impossible. It feels easier to stay in them, right? And to stay into the rut. But that is how you get out of it, is retraining your brain to know I'm not there anymore, right? So let me give you a quick example. I had this weird bout of anxiety in my own life, and I went to my own counselor for it, and she was so helpful, and she picked out something that I would have never thought was the thing, because I was dealing with something different. But she noted that I was feeling really anxious about just the idea of losing my kids, right? And it was crazy because, of course, every parent does not want that to happen, right? That is every parent's worst nightmare, okay? So I know that. That's not like a special anxiety. But for me, I was having this weird, like, I was more anxious about it than normal. And so she pointed that out to me, and all of a sudden it clicked, like, yes, that is why this keeps bubbling up in me in the weirdest ways. And I in my head, I wasn't thinking of it that way. But I remember driving down the road, and all of my kids were in the back of the car with me. They had fallen asleep because we were on a long drive and it was a long day. And that anxiety piped up of, like, I wasn't thinking I was worried about not being with them, but because she had pointed that out to me, I realized that is what it is. And it was the most life-saving, life-changing thing, because I was able to walk myself out of that rut then that I had even started to go into, right? Of, they are right here with me. I'm in the car. They're all in there. I'm driving. I'm not in any scary, shady place. We're just headed home. And I'm in control of this car. And I should not be worried that my kids are not okay or not with me right now. That's just silly. If I really think about it, they are physically in this little space with me, and there's no reason I should be concerned that they're not okay or that they're not with me, you know? So I had to just, like, flip the switch kind of and get out of that rut and remind myself they are okay. That is the reality. Despite what my anxiety tells me, despite what my fears have told me, we're good. And I tell you the truth, that was like the turning point for me of, yes, I still have weird mom fears of, like, what if something happens to my kids? That would be terrible. Or if I see something that has happened to a friend, it totally makes me cry, or it makes me sad, because it will always be my worst nightmare for something bad to happen to my kids. But I no longer have that same anxiety for no reason, out of nowhere, at random moments, linked to being worried about something happening to my kids. Does that make sense? I hope I'm explaining that right, because it's just an example, and obviously everyone struggles with their own anxiety and their own source of it. But I want you to know that although it is very real and it can feel so powerful, it is not a fatal diagnosis. I have so many clients come in that talk about it like they feel like I've been diagnosed with anxiety, like it's this fatal thing, that they cannot ever be free of it. And I want to say that is not true. It's just not true. It's a very real thing. I'm not discrediting that at all, but it is not true that you have to have it forever, or that you have to be on medication for it forever. There is a root or a source. And if you can do the work to figure that out and get to that, and then heal yourself through it, or repair yourself, or get out of that rut, you can absolutely live without this debilitating anxiety all the time, right? The thing I want you to remember is that even the anxiety, I think, can feel so overwhelming and so controlling over you that it does feel like I'm bound, or I'm tied up, or I have no way out, right? I can't be in control, especially if you get to the point of an anxiety attack or a panic attack, which I'll talk about in another video another time. When it gets to that point, it is very intense. I totally get that. And I get that it's hard to feel like you have some sort of control at that point. I'm talking more on, like, the daily, seemingly manageable anxiety, right? Like, I'm a functional, anxious mess. That type of thing is what I'm talking more about. And that you do have the ability to repair, manage, change, whatever you want to call it. It's the rewiring of your brain. It's the changing how you look at things. It's just like what I did when I was in the car of, okay, whoa, hold on a second. My body just freaked out and flooded and told me I'm not okay, this is not okay, I'm anxious, whatever. Guys, when I was in the car, my heart was pounding. I was like, I don't know, just like in a different zone. And it wasn't normal, and it was my body responding to an anxiety that in reality was so untrue. And I think that's what's hard about anxiety, is in a way it almost tricks us into thinking these things that we're so worried about really are true. Or the big thing is they really could be true, right? What if? That is like the curse word of every anxious person out there, is the what if. And you're right, there's a million what ifs right there. But in that moment, I could have gone down a crazy spiral of, well, what if I get run off the road by some crazy person and they take my kids, right? I could have done that, but the likelihood of that is pretty slim. And also, in that moment, that was not a threat, right? I could have talked myself into that being a threat, but that truly was not a threat at that moment. I was driving home with my kids, right? So I think we have to work really hard to change our mindset of these crazy what ifs that pop up all the time. We need to remind ourselves of what is the current and present situation and what are true threats. And it's a dance, because I think you can easily talk yourself into things, but that's where I want you to have that visual of, okay, I'm going back into the rut, and it's harder to get out of it, but I'm going to stay focused, determined, disciplined, consistent to stay out of that rut and rewire my brain to say, no, I don't need to worry about that, I am okay. Or no, I don't need to worry about that, my spouse is okay. Or no, I don't need to worry about that, whatever your fill-in might be right there. But it does take a lot of work. Lastly, I want to say anxiety is such a physical process. Like I said a second ago, when I was in the car and had that whole experience, my heart was pounding and my head was in a different place. And anxiety is a very, very physical process, because our autonomic nervous system is signaling our brain really quickly, danger, danger, we're not okay. It's our fight or flight system, and it just goes off the rails for a minute when you're feeling high anxiety. And even if you're feeling manageable anxiety, my guess is that you're like the duck metaphor, right? Scrambling underneath, but like cool, calm, and collected on the surface, right? But inside, it's probably a lot higher than you're leading on, okay? So it's such a physical process. And when our physical body is spiraling like that, it's hard for our mind to catch up. When our heart is pounding and we're sweating and we have racing thoughts and you have a dry mouth or whatever it is, it's really hard for your mind to catch up. So if you're in that place, I always encourage people to deal with the physical side first, because sometimes that feels a little bit more manageable than dealing with your mind side, right? So I know you're gonna wanna like throat punch me for this, but breathing actually does do something, okay? So I totally know that it's not, people have shared with me, and I know that they don't want to be told, just breathe, it's fine, just take a deep breath, right? Like, I know that you don't want to hear that, and I know that if you're also in like a deep panic, that's really not what you want to hear, but I will tell you, there's something behind it. It's not that you're just trying to panic. I think that's what a lot of people think, is that if someone tells you just breathe, it's almost implying like, why are you freaking out, you know? Like, I feel like there's this thing behind it, like, it's sort of disvalidating, is that a word? It's sort of trying to say what is going on with you is just kind of made up and dramatized. That's not true at all. Maybe someone else doesn't understand what you're going through, but taking a deep breath really does do something. It helps to calm that autonomic nervous system, because you can try this if you want. It is impossible for you to stay like super duper tense and take a genuine deep breath at the same time. They cannot happen together. So there is something behind breathing, because it will slow your system down. Now, is that going to cure you of all anxiety for ever and ever, amen? No, but it's going to start to teach you that you have the reins. You have the steering wheel. You have control over that high anxious process, right? So taking a deep breath reminds you you're in control. You control your body, you control your mind, you control your anxiety, not your anxiety controlling you. So as much as you might not like to hear it, breathe. It is a good thing. It does help. Next thing I would encourage is changing what your physical senses might be. So depends on the situation, depends on where you're at, what you have available, but taking a big drink of water can help reset your system. Maybe you need to eat like a little bit of something just to kind of help reset things. A shock of temperature, like not in a crazy way, but maybe you just need to go hop in a hot or cold shower, or depending on what the temperature difference is outside, step outside for a minute. Something like that. Again, it's not like an immediate shut off or switch, but it's all of those address your physical body, and those can really help your physical body to slow down so that message quits, that message stops being sent to the brain of like, panic, we're not okay, so that your mind has a chance to do its part of like, hey, I am okay, right? I'm fine, I'm whatever I am. It gives your mind a chance to catch up when your body can slow down. So these are just a couple quick tips. I know anxiety is really hard and really overwhelming. Believe me, I've worked with a lot of clients that really feel debilitated by it and that they spin out of control with it, and I get that. I'm not at all minimizing that. I do, however, want you to know that you have control over your body and your anxiety, and it does not have to be a fatal diagnosis. One last thought for you guys is that I think a thing that adds to our anxiety, there's millions of things that add to it, right? I think, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole, but social media, comparison, all sorts of things add to our anxiety. Finances, money, image, all sorts of things can create and add to our anxiety, and they can seem never ending, right? And then there's something about us trying to control that in a certain way that we're trying to, we're trying to manufacture peace through controlling things, right? And this is like a little bit of a side note or separate note, but it's all under the umbrella, right? You cannot manufacture peace with control. So having high anxiety about your spouse doing something and trying to control what your spouse is doing so that you feel more at peace is false peace. It's not real. It's not actually going to help your anxiety. It's not actually going to free you from this constant anxious wheel that you're on. So just remember that to really work through your anxiety and to really heal it, you have to work on it individually and know that the place your control should be placed is over you and over your mind, body, and soul, not anyone else or anything else. You only get to control you. I know that's a thing that we hear all the time, but I think it's a thing that is very under practiced, really. So I want you to feel hopeful. I don't know if you feel that way, but I hope you do, that anxiety is a thing that can be beat. It is not a fatal diagnosis. So here's this, like I said, this is probably just scratching the surface, but I hope there was a few tips or tricks in there that might help you, or just maybe some eye-opening insight. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, whatever, leave them below. Hit the subscribe button and share with a friend, and keep your eye out for future videos. Thanks for being here.